Thank you, Caesar. And Caesar and Peter are very good friends of long standing. They're not old friends, okay? And we've got a lot of stuff together and had a lot of fun too over the years. So let me see, we're gonna try to share screen here. And I'm gonna try to do this and keep the presentation going too. Let's see here. Okay. So thank you all very much for participating today. I respect the value of your time, and we're going to try to make it valuable for you. It's very helpful, Peter, your remarks about some of your brokers being relatively new to commercial, or neophytes, or just starting to look into the question of making money as a commercial broker. And that's really important to me, because I think there's some concepts that are good to share with you about that in terms of making this material more valuable. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak for all of you, of course, today. I'm going to try to keep open the side panel of my presentation so that I can see who's out there, and hopefully that will allow me to kind of call on you from time to time. If I can figure out how to do that? Yeah, I think I can figure out how to do that. In order to kind of liven up this presentation, for those of you who have heard me speak in person back in the good old days when we used to do that, you know that I like to walk around the room. I like to call on people. I like to sort of engage in what law school calls the Socratic method, about bringing people in, asking them questions, and getting them to be involved in the talk, because I think you're going to get more out of it. So let me start by, of course, offering the usual lawyer caveats, which is, remember, I'm not offering you any legal or tax advice today. There's no attorney-client relationship being formed here. And also, things are happening really fast. So some of the information here you might have to confirm later, because it's changing constantly. Much here is my own opinion and my speculation about things and where they're going to go. And remember to wash your hands and wear a mask a lot still. Okay, so, but the good news is, obviously, we've got a much better picture on the horizon. So first, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and maybe Caesar will be my first victim. So Caesar, when is the commercial real estate owner really likely or ready to speak with you?
Right now, they're ready.
Okay, exactly, you're right. And the answer is when she's really scared. Okay, when things are scary, that's when a real estate investor really wants to talk to a broker. Okay, and so what really scares a commercial owner? Peter?
What scare commercial owner? Well, I guess.
Perfect, Peter. You're right. The answer is vacancy. But Peter, you have the handout. Just read the handout. Yeah, you can cheat, okay? And Steve, so what scares them even more?
Well, our market situation is such as right now, if you are looking at the different kind of commercial sectors, let me give you an example, such as the hotel and the hospitality industry. They are scared to death. But if you are looking at the office, they are also scared to death, you know. So
shopping center owners are scared to death, and apartment building owners are scared to death.
Shopping center owners also, yeah.
So really, and you're right about all of those things, and we'll talk actually a little bit about that. But actually, what I'm saying about this is what scares an owner even more, and that is when your property is occupied, but you still can't collect the rent and you can't evict, right? What's the difference between vacant space and occupied space when you're not getting rent either way? Okay, so all of these things are issues right now that are being presented to real estate owners, and it's a great time for you to get out, bang the phone, and talk to people. Don't door knock, because that freaks people out, but it's a great time to talk to people because they really want to hear from you. So today, the first rule of public speaking is tell them what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you said, right? So first, I'm going to tell you about what my job is today, what your job is every day. We're going to talk about trends before and after COVID. We're going to talk about something I call tomorrow's Bloomberg News, winners and losers and why, which is kind of a game I'm going to play with you. and talk to you about the fact that good news is here, but trends are here to stay as well. And we're going to close with concerns about racism and bullying. Okay. So first, I want to introduce myself to you very quickly, because I think some of you are asking, why is a real estate lawyer talking to me about this stuff? All right. And so what I'll tell you first is that I'm the principal, CEO, chairman of the board, and head busboy for David Fu and Associates. We are a 4-attorney firm in Arcadia, and we have a general real estate practice. So we do business, litigation, real estate litigation, transactions, and estate planning, because I have a tax degree also. Formerly, I was an investment real estate broker, and I'm a realtor member and a GRI instructor, and I was the former counsel to CAREPA, the Chinese Real Estate Association. In real estate, I started in 1986 in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up here in Beverly Hills. I went away to Berkeley, and I started to do residential in San Francisco. In about 1987, I came back to LA, really because my family is very close to the Panda Express people, and a lot of people know Andrew Chern, the chairman of Panda. And he called me once because my mother was bugging him to get me to come home. And he said, so what are you doing? I said, I'm selling real estate. He said, do you plan to live in the Bay Area? I said, no. He said, well, then why are you doing it there? I said, real estate is an information business. So you're collecting information about a place you're going to leave. You belong in Southern California if you're going to continue to pursue a real estate career. And he's kind of a smart guy. He's got about 5 billion reasons why he's smarter than me. And I always listen to Andrew's advice. When I came back to Southern California, I sold apartment buildings, shopping centers, office buildings, industrial centers, development land, both in the conventional and auction formats, because in 1990, the real estate market crashed. And I was recruited to go to Kennedy Wilson, which was becoming at that point the world's largest real estate auctioneering company. They had extensive experience in residential, but they didn't really have a commercial department. So they brought me in to liquidate commercial portfolios for a lot of banks that were going under. I'm a member of NAR and CAR. And as I said, I was a risk management instructor for the GRI designation. And I've also taught the fundamentals of commercial real estate for NAR. In the law, I served, I've practiced law since 1996. I served as the chair of the real estate law section for the State Bar of California, which is now the California Lawyers Association. It has 6,000 members across the state of California. And I served on the advisory board for the continuing education of the bar, which is the publishing arm of the State Bar. And I am a very frequent continuing ed speaker for attorneys for the legal continuing education that lawyers have to receive. I've also served as the chair and on the commission for the Commission on Judicial Nominees Evaluations, which is the State Bar mandated committee or commission that conducts confidential investigations of judicial candidates for the governor. And I'm currently about to be appointed to the Judicial Council, which is a policy-making body for California courts. It's chaired by the Chief Justice, and it's mostly staffed by judges and appellate justices from the state. There are 4 attorney members. I'll be one of those 4. Okay, so why do you care? Okay, and the answer is because of my background and because of my role in organized law and organized real estate, I have had the opportunity to look at trends all over the state. And I see things both in the commercial and the residential and the industrial areas of the market. My friends who are serving on the executive committee of the real property law section practice in all areas of practice from, Ukiah up in the north to San Diego in the south, to Sacramento in the east and Santa Monica in the west. And so we share a lot of information about what's happening in the market and what we see about trends that are being faced, about solutions to problems and things of that nature, okay? So the advice that I have for my clients that I gained from all this experience is advice to some extent you can share with your clients. Of course, you're not going to give anybody any legal advice unless you're an attorney, but other than that, there are a lot of things that you can share with people that help to make your clients see that your advice is valuable. So what's my job today? My job today is to help you to make money. By helping you to make money, you help me to make money, okay? And the reason why that is because when there are issues that come up, when something is new or novel, or you believe that there's a problem which requires some solution, often people will turn to me because they see that I've shared information with them before, they found what I had to say informative and interesting, and they believe that I will be able to help them, okay? So what's your job every day? Your job every day is to get out and talk to people. Your job is to talk to them. You know, I started, again, real estate in the 80s, and Tom Hopkins was the real estate guru, and back in those days. Caesar's smiling and laughing. And Tom Hopkins used to say, see 20 people every day. That was his motto, see 20 people every day. And, you know, during COVID, that gets a little tricky, but something like that is similar to what you should be looking for, okay? And no matter how busy you are, never stop prospecting, okay? So what do you have to say to people when you're prospecting? Right now is a very good opportunity to share that information with people, okay? We just talked about the fact that people are scared. We're facing a great deal of change. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. But the reason why they want to talk to you is what I call tomorrow's Bloomberg, okay? If you could see the future, do you think you could make a little bit of money? If you had tomorrow's Wall Street Journal or tomorrow's Bloomberg, and you knew which stocks were going to go up and which ones were going to fall, you think maybe you could take advantage of that a little bit? Well, you can, not with crystal clarity and not always correctly, but there's certainly things that you can see just from reading the newspaper, if you're paying attention and with a little fundamental understanding of economics, that you can share with your clients to help them to see that you can help them to see the future. May not always be right, but general trends will likely be true as they are observed by other people who are much smarter than all of us. And your job is to share that information with your clients. In order to do that, you need to educate yourself, and that's why you're here today, right? Because we're going to share some information that will help you with that. This will help you to get ahead of the curve and to persuade your clients that they can beat the rest of the market with information that you're helping them with, solutions for today's problems, okay? And that's true whether we're talking about leasing or management or sales, because all of these trends are macroeconomic trends that are affecting our strategies in terms of how we buy, sell, and manage real estate. And remember one thing, by the way, generally speaking, real estate management is an exclusion to your realtor's E&O insurance policy. If you are conducting any real estate management services, you must make your broker aware of that. And likely your broker has already told you you may not engage in management for the company, okay, or without the company, as long as your license is hanging below the broker's license. So I'm making this observation to you. It will be valuable to some people and not to others. I think that you can still offer insights into certain strategies to your clients that they can then take to their managers and make valuable to them, okay? So first, let's talk about where we were going before COVID-19, okay? And, you know, I don't know about you, but to me, that feels like a really long time ago. I was watching something on television the other day where they had some tape that they were running from March, and they were saying, can you believe it? Some people say this is going to go on for the next 90 days. That's crazy. Well, I was a little bit more pessimistic than that. I had assumed that we were going to be going through October. I, of course, was dead wrong about that. And, you know, it just tells you that sometimes life can get away from you, all right? Well, what direction was the market moving in? The market wasn't really doing a whole lot. Remember that? I mean, it was sort of, it was not a buyer's market. It was not a seller's market. Actually, I told people it was more of a normal market at that time, but we see that so infrequently in California that we don't really know what it looks like, right? Usually prices are shooting up like a rocket or they're dropping like a stone, right? And that thing where it was just sort of, you know, meandering back and forth, that was really a challenge, right? And so today we know that at least in residential, we're in a pronounced buyer's market. Okay, certainly, especially in certain price ranges. and therefore, and certainly certain markets. And so we have a much better idea of what's going on there. And that's why brokers are making money. Remember, when buyers and sellers agree about value, brokers make money. Brokers make money because there's going to be transactions, right? When buyers and sellers disagree, brokers go on vacation, okay? Because those two curves are not matching up, right? They're not in line. When that's really one curve, buyers and sellers agree on price and terms, you're going to have, all the transactions are going to make because there's no disagreement. Seller says, I want $1 million, he gets $1 million, right? So this is a simple idea, but you have to think about this in terms of your strategy as a broker and how you manage your career, all right? So talking about commercial, what we were already seeing before COVID came was we were experiencing growing pressure due to the Amazon effect, that the advent and expansion of online e-commerce was killing retail stores, right? We know that. We were watching that reading the papers, watching TV, just driving down the street, we could see increasing retail vacancy. What we see with COVID-19 is that it's accelerated changes in our society, which were already coming. Increasingly, we're moving toward that online platform for retail sales. I was never a big, online shopper, and now I buy everything that way. And, and I like it. For the most part, I've, learned how to shop that way. And even though I'm a dinosaur, I have the ability to do that, and it does work for me. And when we don't like it, we return it. It's actually, very effective way to move merchandise. So this has contributed to growing pressure on retail space because they're competing for fewer and fewer tenants. And as we know, it likely means more vacancy in retail. Same thing is true in office space. Remember, in office space, what we found out was that we're already moving because of the changing technology toward telecommuting. But now this has obviously gone from 0 to 60, just in the first month or two of the pandemic. My associates are now commuting from home. They don't come into the office anymore. They occasionally stop in for something. My doctor talked to me about telemedicine. I said, what's telemedicine? I mean, the idea that you can see your doctor on TV and he's going to tell you or she's going to tell you what's wrong with you. I mean, this is a concept that I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd ever heard of before 2020. Okay. And so this says a lot about these factors and how they affect the demand for space. Facebook announced, last year, almost a year ago, that they were going to have many of their employees work from home permanently. Mark Zuckerberg said that within a decade, as many as half of the company's 45,000 employees would work from home. Again, last year, talking about when will the pandemic be over, they were saying that, again, in the New York Times, that white collar companies are racing to be the last to return to the office. I remember talking with lawyers last summer about when their firms were going to come back, and they said, oh, not till September. Oh, not till the first of the year. Well, both of those things have passed, and they're still not back in the office. So Twitter said some of its employees would work from home permanently. So what we see here is what I'm saying is that what's going on is we see clicks over bricks. More businesses are moving to online platforms, both for office and retail. Less and less office and retail space is needed. This has effects that ripple through our economy. What happens to janitors, Starbucks baristas in downtown locations, retail clerks, Uber and Lyft drivers. Now, my stepbrother is an Uber and Lyft driver, and he works for a messenger service. He was busy running samples back and forth to labs for a while. They're not even doing that anymore because the sampling regime has fallen off a great deal now that we have a vaccine. His Uber and Lyft business went, down by 80%. It's very hard for him to make a living. These are huge changes that are happening in our society today. And we're going to continue to see them because COVID has accelerated changes which were already coming. Okay. So let's play a game now I call Winners and Losers and Why. I'm going to pick on some new victims. How about you, Lori? Okay, since you're here, we're going to welcome you to the party. So we're going to talk about winners and losers and why. Okay, and let's start with shopping centers. Let me try to try to get this smaller here. Okay, so so shopping, regional shopping centers, like think Westfield, Lori, you know, are they winner or loser and why?
Right now, losers.
I think so. I think so.
You
All
think?
right.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Alex? You're next. Okay. Multi-tenant office buildings, winner, loser, or why?
The losers, because again, like you were talking about, most of the people's working from home, and so it's more open spaces for rent.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's see. We had David Yoon walk away, and he's back now. So, David, how about industrial distribution centers? Are they winners or losers, and why? David, you have to unmute.
Industrial distribution centers are highly in demand, and their demand is growing. And if they can be successfully leased or are currently leased, they're going up in value. So industrial distribution is a hot product in today's market.
Right, so they must be winners, right? So how about industrial warehouses? Diana, are you out there? Because I only see a blurry picture for you. Are you working with us, or are you, is this a placebo? Diana Liu? Can you unmute? How about you, Todd? Are you there? All right, let's go to the next one. How about Tomas? Tomas is always ready to play. Tomas, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how about industrial warehouses? Are they
So
winners or
industrial-
losers, and why?
Yes, with the increase online shopping, industrial warehousing are in high demand.
Right, right. What we're seeing is Americans are buying more goods than ever before. Business in China is booming. The problem is that the cargo ships are all docked offshore because we're having problems getting enough people to run the automated cargo systems to offload that stuff. And there's a lot of problems with container ships and containers because it's affected worldwide commerce. The containers are all going back and forth between China and the United States. So if you live almost anywhere else in the world, it's very hard to get goods these days. How about a single tenant restaurant site? Peter, are you there? Peter Dong? Let's see, who's actually got a picture up? Everybody is, are you there, Peter?
Peter Tom
about Ken-
or Peter Cam? Which one?
Peter Dong.
Okay.
I'm just trying to pick on somebody else. Ken Lee, are you around? I see everybody with suspicious pictures here and they're all hiding. Okay. How about you, Peter Cam? Why don't you tell us?
Well, of course.
Single tenant restaurant site.
This restaurant suffering a whole lot. So I don't know how they're going to return to normal business. So single tenant restaurant is particularly vulnerable. So I think they are losers.
Okay, so yeah, so let's talk about this now. How do you advise landlords about these things? You know, well, with restaurant locations, they're going to come back, right? Just sit tight. They need help. They're getting help from the federal government, actually. Let me see. Here we go. And what is happening right now is that obviously they're dormant, but just now, of course, they're opening up again. Okay. How about shopping center owners? You know, my advice to shopping center owners is you want tenants that do what Amazon can't. Okay, especially service tenants, haircutters, beauty salons, yes, restaurants too. Everything, you know, until Amazon figures out how to paint your nails, okay, the beauty salons are going to be good tenants for you. We have very much changed our thinking about retail and how retail operates. What's happened there is that it used to be with shopping centers that we hated tenants that kept people in the center. They didn't like bowling alleys, they didn't like movie theaters, they didn't like restaurants. And now the modern way of thinking retail, modern retail merchandising is we want you know, entertainment centers, you know, virtual reality centers, movie theaters, restaurants, things that keep people in the shopping center. It used to be that we thought that they consume parking and frustrated shoppers. Now what we know is that because we have a increasing trend toward lifestyle space, is that we want to keep people in those places. And I pointed out about office buildings. Office buildings are a mixed bag, and there's another slide toward the end of the presentation talks about this. But we have to think a little bit more about, perhaps other types of uses that help to absorb increasing vacancy. Creative space is something that appeals to, the millennials and the Gen X and Gen Y folks. Phone call centers might be a viable use of certain kinds of space. Churches are often taking over private space, or private schools or tutoring centers. So all of these things are potential tenants for office buildings where we are seeing some increasing vacancy because conventional use is going away. Just remember, of course, you're not giving your clients any legal advice, okay? So let's talk about defaulting tenants. And remember, so your phone call might be, hi, Mr. Smith. How are you today? You might remember we've spoken before with you about your shopping center on Main Street. I'm just checking in today because I've been doing some very interesting investigation into current trends. And I'm curious to share with you information that I have about how many shopping center owners are responding to the COVID crisis. Are you interested in information like that? That kind of thing. And so some of this will help you to draw the tenant, the owner into conversation to say, to give you more information about it, not because you're going to use it for something, but to help them to think about these problems and to solve them. So a lot of tenants, of course, are behind on the rent right now, right? And the question is, what do we do about them? And the answer, of course, because I'm a lawyer, is it depends, right? The questions that you want to think through with them are, are the tenants otherwise fundamentally sound, right? Were they doing fine before COVID? If they were, do you think they're going to bounce back after COVID as the shutdown lifts, right? Remember, when you're talking to your landlord clients, that going dark isn't just about rent loss. It's about extended vacancy, leasing commissions, and tenant improvement costs. All of these things make a tenant turnover, especially at a time when we're in really an economic crisis, very, very frightening. Okay. I always use this example. I use this example over the past 10 years. I think just in the last year or so, this lease finally got, or the space finally got leased. And Caesar, you probably remember me talking about this before. It was the Dulux paint store on the corner of Main and like Granada, or I forget what it is.
They have plants. Now they have like a nursery.
Right. Okay. So, but how long was that vacant? It was probably vacant for 15 years.
At least.
It was forever. I mean, can you imagine having a big property like that, probably 3,000 square feet or something, and it would just sat idle for so many years? I mean, that, they're paying the property taxes and insurance on it, and vacant buildings are a magnet for vandals and homeless people. So vacant buildings are really a problem. A lot of times you cannot buy insurance for a vacant building. So, what I advise a lot of clients? I advise them to be sensitive, to be aware of what's going on, okay, and to be patient, right? But we're going to talk a little bit more about this specifically, okay? So right now, you need to call them. For a change, they want to hear from you, okay? This is a great opportunity for you to have a warm call, somebody who's receptive to hearing from a broker. Talk to them about how they're solving their problems. And we're going to offer some other ideas in just a minute. Right now, you need to play defense. You can't really look at tenants as deadbeats. If the government orders us to close our doors, they're not just refusing to pay the rent. They really are struggling. Okay, so this is the time to be sensitive and smart about that. Okay, so in terms of evaluating the tenant, we talked about this earlier. Were they solid before COVID? Are they service sector? That was the thing I mentioned a moment ago. Barbershops, hair salons, real estate companies, restaurants, other types of personal service businesses that are going to be immune to the Amazon effect, okay? Another thing that, you know, the landlord should be asking is, did the tenant get any PPP money? Remember, PPP money was to be used for the payment of rent, among other things. Some tenants pocket that money and then say, oh, I don't have any money to pay the landlord. Well, first of all, they're supposed to pay that to the landlord under the terms of the PPP loan. But secondly, you know, is it a good faith, you know, arrear, or is it a bad faith arrear, right? If they have this money coming in and they're just sitting on it, or they're, you know, buying real estate with their PPP money, you know, you got to have some harsh words for them, okay? How far behind are they? You know, have they been paying anything at all? And then the other questions that you want to go over with the landlord is, how much longer is the lease, and is there a personal guarantee? Okay, all of these questions are really important to how you are going to work out the solutions. So there's kind of a hierarchy to how I look at this, okay? And the first one is, as a landlord, you try not to give away any rent permanently, okay? It's the difference between a deferment and an abatement. An abatement is you don't have to pay it at all. A deferment means you're going to pay me back later, okay? And I always try to get a deferment instead of an abatement. Get the tenant to pay something. A free ride is bad. You know, when you get used to getting something for free, the idea of paying for it later kind of chaps your hide, okay? So you want to make sure that the tenant understands this is not a free ride. You've been kind of skating for a while. I'm helping you a little bit, but it's not going to go on forever, and you need to pay me something. At least get them to pay the CAM charges. Okay, a lot of commercial landlords are enjoying abatement from mortgage payments too, because of the operation of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and other federal agencies and federally guaranteed loans, pressuring lenders to allow mortgage forgiveness, or not forgiveness, but deferment for now, and instead increasing the term of the loan. So if that's the case, then the landlord doesn't have mortgage overhead, but they still have CAM overhead. They still have to pay for security, insurance, property tax. They still have to maintain the property. And so getting that CAM money continuing to flow through helps the landlord to at least tread water and continue to pay those expenses. As they reopen, at least, start to get the rent and get something to address the arrears and gradually increase that. You know, if you have a restaurant business and you're just starting to reopen and you're at 25% occupancy now, you're really not making any money yet. You're really probably not making enough money to pay the rent, but you can pay something, and you need to pay something. So start that now, and you know, God forbid we have another shutdown, but assuming that we are really on the road to recovery, assuming that we are going to get 200 million Americans vaccinated, you are already at 100 million now, then we are going to see a return to normalcy. So gradually increase that. Say, you know, Mr. Restaurant owner, I know that you're having a hard time today. You need to pay me at least 25% of the rent now. I want you to pay me 50% of the rent starting in June. I want you to pay me 100% of the rent starting in October. And then you're going to start paying me 100% of the rent plus all the arrears over some period of time. Okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So you can also say to that tenant, in exchange for that, I'm going to extend your lease. Okay, well, what does that do for the landlord? What it does for the landlord is it helps that landlord to avoid that space going dark. Okay, because if the lease, so let's say the lease is going to expire in 4 months. A lot of tenants, if they're really underwater and they're having a hard time, are going to try to throw in the towel and say, no, I'm going to walk, you come after me. Okay. By working with them, you can keep them in that space and say, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to extend the repayment of your money, but I want you to extend your lease by 2 years or 3 years, okay, depending on the tenant, depending on the original term of the lease, depending on your strategy and so forth. And the reason why you want to do that is because it helps the landlord to avoid paying commissions to release that space and the tenant improvement expenses that are incurred to lease that space in the first place. Very often in a retail shopping center, you don't make any money for maybe as much as 2 years because you are recovering the tenant improvement costs and the brokerage commissions before you start to make a profit on that space. And if you take that space and you turn it over every 5 years, think about it, you're only making money 3 out of 5 years, right? So that's extremely costly to a landlord. This is the opportunity to take that space and push it out further. Another thing is, is there personal liability under the lease? If there's personal liability, that's even better because the tenant can't really just walk away. If there isn't personal liability now, why not negotiate for personal liability? There are some questions about under federal law whether or not they're going to allow you to do that kind of thing. And we generally haven't imposed personal liability where there wasn't before. But remember, so far the government hasn't told us that we have to wait to recover the back rent. And I think that, and this is sort of an up and down issue that comes and goes. To be honest, I can't keep track of it right now. But I think that if you can negotiate for a personal liability, that will help to make sure that that rent will be eventually be repaid. You hate to defer payment for something and then have them cheat you out of it. It's the old joke. And okay, I'm going to say this is some off-color humor, but I hopefully everybody will take it in good stead today on St. Patrick's Day. It's the old joke about the Polish lottery. Okay. The grand prize is $1 million. They pay you $1 a year for 1,000,000 years. Okay. Way back when Caesar and I were children and we told Polish jokes. Okay. So, don't get cheated by the tenant because you've extended the repayment period. If you've extended the repayment period for 5 years, but they've only got 1 year left on the lease, you really think that they're going to keep making payments to you when they're out of the space? It's just not likely to happen. Okay, so you have to have the termination of the lease be coterminous, end at the same time, at least with the repayment period for the arrears on the rents. Okay, so in that regard, remember, I always say that there are 4 rules about money. All right, number 1, more is better than less. Number 2, sooner is better than later. Number 3, something is better than nothing. And my favorite, number 4, mine is better than yours. Okay, so these are important issues, but they actually apply if you think about how these negotiations work in terms of setting up the repayment scheme. Okay, and even though it's funny and it's curious, if you think about it, it's true. Okay, you can't really argue with it. Okay, so I know some of you are thinking, why tell the landlord to avoid paying broker commissions? I mean, you're brokers, right? Well, it's simple, okay? You're winning their trust, okay? You are showing that you are looking out for them, not just for your commission, right? That is going to protect them from economic harm. And what that says about you is that they should love you and respect you for it, and that you have earned their business. Okay, and this is a time when they want help from you. I'm buying a house right now, and I hired Leslie's Pools to come out and look at the swimming pool. And they come out and basically they try to sell me all new pool equipment. I pay them to come and look at my pool equipment, and then they tell me, oh, everything's bad, you need to replace it all. Okay, why am I sharing this story? Because I think Leslie's Pool sucks, right? And they'll never, ever get my business for anything because I came to them when I needed something, and instead they tried to take advantage of me. Don't do that. Okay, this is the time for you to be just straightforward with your client, try to sincerely help them, and to build that relationship and that trust with them, and to help guide them through these things. I always tell my clients, look, I make more money doing something the other way. Okay, but I'm telling you to do this instead, right? Why do I tell them that? A, because it's true, okay? And B, because it shows them that the advice that I'm giving them is sincere. I'm not just trying to feather my nest. I'm not just ringing my cash register, okay? I can, and a lot of people have questions about lawyers about this, and Peter knows that. And, it's a reputation that we fight all the time, okay? But I take that very seriously because your credibility with your client is like my credibility with my client. If you lose that, you're never going to have a good relationship with them. And so it's important for them to remember that you are not just trying to take advantage of them, that The reason why you're doing this is because it's better for them. And sooner or later, you know, you're going to get their leasing business. Sooner or later, you're going to get their sale business when they choose to sell that property, because you've won that, that trust with them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the post-COVID economy. Okay, and because some of the questions that are coming up right now in terms of reading the future are what's going to happen next. And basically what the concerns are that we see today are about the economic recovery, right? Will the economy bounce back is one question. And the other question is are we providing too much stimulus, right? $1.9 trillion just approved by the federal government on top of the approximately $1.9 trillion that came out last year, okay? And so that's a lot of stimulus, right? The good news is that most economists agree that the economy will bounce back because they believe that the economy was in fundamentally good condition before COVID set in, okay? But the concern though is, you know, whether or not we're headed for rapid inflation because of the extensive stimulus being offered today, okay? So, and I apologize for those of you who know all this stuff and remember Econ 1 from, you know, from undergraduate school, but I'm still going to kind of go over something very, very quickly because I think it helps for you to put it all in perspective, and because your clients may not really understand how this works and they may appreciate the explanation from you, okay? So remember the Federal Reserve Bank, which is, you know, commonly called the Fed, manipulates interest rates by controlling the discount rate. Okay, I said here this affects the money supply. I think actually that this is an incorrect statement. I don't think this is an M1, M2 discussion, but I don't really remember now. So just take it with a grain of salt, okay? Basically, interest rates are reduced when the Fed wants to stimulate the economy because cheap borrowing stimulates economic activity. Raising interest rates tends to cool off economic activity. But an overstimulated economy leads to inflation. And inflation devastates the purchasing power of working class people because working class people generally don't own assets that are a hedge against inflation. Generally, only wealthy people do, okay? So if you have to, you know, if it takes $10,000 to buy a loaf of bread, you've got serious problems, right? And this is what's happened several times in history. I see Caesar laughing about that, but we all know this, that it's happened many times in history. And especially when that kind of inflation sets in, it happens very fast. So if a dollar is only worth 10 cents tomorrow, but you're being paid $1,000 today, that means overnight, your $1,000 will only buy $100 worth of goods. And so obviously that dramatically impacts people because they don't have any purchasing power. They're basically working for nothing, okay? So, you know, there are a lot of concerns about inflation right now that are being sounded by different people. This is a, you know, an opinion column from the New York Times that said too many smart people are being too dismissive about inflation. You know, Stephen Ratner writes, the fears were overblown for years, but let's not be too blasé about this because it could be very hard to halt high prices if they haunt us again. The evils of inflation have been seen in our, you know, fairly recent past. In the 70s, and Caesar, I don't, were you in the business? You were in the business that far. Yeah, and you know, that's before my time too. But the Fed allowed interest rates to go to 20%. Okay, and actually when I started in real estate, my managers were telling me, you guys think you have a hard time now, think about what it's like to sell apartment buildings at 18% interest, okay? And there was a lot of devices that came out of that, wraparound financing and other financing strategies to try to avoid the high interest rates. High interest rates led to a real estate recession, which was in part needed to slow down inflation. Inflation is good for real estate generally because real estate's a hedge against inflation. When prices are going up, real estate prices go up, so you're making money. But too much inflation leads the Fed to take action to increase rates, and that's really bad for real estate, right? It tends to drop down values because especially commercial real estate is being sold based on how much money it earns. And when too much money is being diverted to debt service, it takes away what is all the upside improvement in the value of that real estate. Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO at JP Morgan Chase, has been quoted here by saying that, there's a very good chance that we're going to have a gangbuster economy for the rest of this year and easily into 2022. And the question is, does that overheat everything? And that's from Bloomberg itself. So, these are questions that are facing our economy today. And I know they're not very good questions, right? And a lot of you are saying, so David, is it all bad news? No, it's not. And so Paul Krugman is an economist that I follow a lot in the New York Times. And this is a column he wrote back in January, just before the Biden election, or the Biden swearing in ceremony. And so he said that there were 4 rules about Bidenomics, and I'm going to omit 1 and 4 here, but he said basically, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And what he says here is that in terms of rule number 2 is don't obsess about debt. So there are a lot of questions about raising the national debt, which is what we're doing by giving away $1.9 trillion. And he says that the Obama agenda was hobbled from the start because there was too much concern about government borrowing. He says Biden should not let that happen again. He said, the fact is that these very dire predictions about deficit never came to fruition, okay? And he says there's now widespread agreement among economists that the debt is far less of a problem than conventional wisdom asserted. Historically, and people have been talking about this for a long time, every time, right, the Democrats want to spend money, the Republicans say, you're mortgaging our future, it's going to kill the economy, it's bad for the economy, the government is competing with ordinary people. They've been saying this for years, and yet the reality is that it's really never been a problem. We have gone into debt many, many times, substantial debt, and yet we haven't seen real problems with interest rates and the government competing for money in the private sector. What Paul Krugman observes here is that it may be that the reason for that is because even though the federal debt can be rather high at times, that actually it's being borrowed at very low interest rates. And so, at least by historical standards, and Cesar, when you started in real estate, what was kind of the standard, because they're usually variable loans, right? I started in '86, okay?
I started about the same time. My first house, I got so happy I got 13.25 adjustable, Home Savings of America.
That's pretty good. I remember in '87 that like the standard, like apartment building loans, where they were all variable, okay, and it was an 8 1/4 start rate, 8 1/4 plus 11th district cost of funds, right? So, and it was the 11th district cost of funds index that the 8 1/4 was being pegged to, okay, and 8 1/4, oh, that was not bad, 8 1/4. When was the last time we saw 8 1/4% interest rates? The answer is in the late '80s. That was the last time. Ever since then, interest rates have really hovered between 3 and 5%, right? So actually what we're seeing is very low interest rates, okay? And anybody complaining about paying 3% interest, needs to have his head examined, okay? But Paul Krugman says, look, don't fall for and he blames it on the Republicans, and I'm not trying to make a political point here, okay? But he says, he calls it fake deficit hawkery, okay, from Republicans. He says they screech about debt under Obama, and then they ram through a huge unfunded tax cut under Trump, right? And this is a true statement because, the Trump tax cut was unfunded in the sense that we didn't stop spending, right? You have to fund a tax cut by stopping spending. We didn't do that. We just cut taxes. And that really contributed to a large deficit. The truth is, actually, and it's very funny because they always say it's the other way around, is that under all the Republican presidents since Reagan, Bush 41 and 43, and Trump, all left larger deficits than Clinton and Obama did. Okay? They don't talk about this very much, but it's true. Okay, and really since the '70s, no president has struggled with runaway inflation. Okay, so that leads to number 3. Okay, which is Paul Krugman's advice: don't worry about inflation. He said constant warnings about soaring prices. And claims that the government was hiding the true rate of inflation, which is not a true statement, plagued the Obama presidency. But the reality is that inflation has never taken off. Yet people are arguing for it again now. Actually, in a way, the absence of inflation is actually kind of a problem, because we do see also a marked failure to increase real incomes to families. And so we actually kind of need a little bit of inflation, but we're not getting it. Krugman says that this is a good time to emphasize at least one lesson that we learned during the Trump years. And that is, he says, we can run a hot economy with low unemployment and large budget deficits without having inflation. Okay. And so he says, he argues that Biden should do it again because it can make the American economy hot again. And I offered my observation here that there are many economists that say that actually the US economy has the ability to achieve 6, 7, 8, 9% GDP growth. You're usually around 2 or less than 2% GDP growth. And that actually the US economy has been managed far below its potential. Okay, so what's the bottom line about this, all right, is that as far as talking to your landlord clients, is that number one, it looks like the economy is going to take off. Okay, it looks like it's going to be strong. There's a lot of statements about the fact that Americans have been forced into saving. We're not a nation of savers, and yet we have set records for saving over the past 12 months. But there's a lot of pent-up demand behind that people want to get on cruise ships. They want to book trips to Europe. They want to go, on vacations. They want to go out into restaurants. They want to do all these things. And that all of these things are going to drive the economy. That suggests that your retail tenants and office tenants are going to be okay. They're going to make it. Okay. So you need to be flexible with them and help them to survive over the next about 6 months or so, maybe a little bit longer. And then chances are they're going to do okay, because really better times are likely just ahead. Okay. That's even true for office space. And I think I had asked, was it Alex? I asked about the office space question a little bit earlier. One commenter said that coronavirus will not kill the office space. Okay. And he says that it has enabled people to work, away from the office, and that is causing disruption. And so those are, disruption causes uncertainty in a market, right? But he also says that, that there were changes coming before COVID. So, he refers to this so-called creative class, and we're talking about really as, the dot-com bunch, people who are officing in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, right? And actually, even in 2018, we had some negative growth to that market sector. Even though the economy was growing, at a healthy rate, they said here 2.9%. And London and Paris were experiencing the same things. So these issues that we see in office space were actually already coming. And what he said here also, and I agree with this, he said, the explanation for the decline, mostly high housing costs because of limits on new construction, obscures other forces that were already destabilizing the traditional office market, okay? And what Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon were doing is they were beginning to split up their headquarters into multiple locations. Well, what does that suggest? It suggests that they didn't feel like it was necessary for everybody to be in San Francisco. They don't all have to be in LA, right? What they began to find was that because of technology, they could pull talent from many different markets. They can come from Austin, they can come from, Charlotte, North Carolina, they can come from Chicago. And so they could split up their teams into smaller units in many other places and take advantage of lower housing and office costs, right? That's pulling demand away from those traditional hubs, places like San Francisco and New York. So these things were coming and they're continuing to come. But he says, look, the reality is a lot of people are going to burn out at home and they're going to want to go back to the office. Some employers are going to require that they come back to the office. Some employers are still concerned about office productivity when people are away from the office. And others will get used to officing from home. The reason why I'm buying a new home right now is because my associates have decided they've been telecommuting all this time and they want to continue to do that. And I just figured that why do I want to keep paying rent when I can pay my mortgage instead? So, you know, I am following that trend and, you know, in a very small role, but, you know, a lot of people have made the same conclusion or drawn the same conclusion that I have. Okay. Okay. So I'm almost done, but I want to very quickly get to something, you know, that I think of as the dark side of the pandemic, and that is that there are increasing incidents of racial harm and attacks on particularly Asians and Asian Pacific Islanders. This, of course, was fueled in part by some political leaders who have tried to exploit fear by stoking racism, and it starts with fear and fear mongering. You know, just last night in Atlanta, 8 people were killed in shootings at 3 massage parlors. 4 of them were confirmed to be of Korean descent. The shooter is a 21-year-old Caucasian. We don't know why he did it right now. There's some question about the fact that he may have been a sex addict and had taken out some of his hostility on these. They were probably sex workers in these massage parlors. And there's no confirmed anti-Asian bias at this time in that attack, or at least, you know, when I just made this slide this morning for all of you. You know, these things have been coming for a while. For a year now, there have been warnings from the media, warnings from the FBI, you know, murders, this one taking place in Texas in a Sam's Club parking lot, not by a 19-year-old. It was against an Asian American family. A young boy was cut from his eye to his ear. You know, there have been increasing calls for concern and warnings by the FBI to be vigilant about these things. In that respect, a group has created a Stop AAPI Hate website, which helps us to deal with these things and to report these incidents. I believe to date there have been 3,800 incidents of anti-Asian attacks in the United States since the outset of COVID, and that's a lot. In the last year, in the last 4 years, we've seen an increasing incidents of racism and race hatred in our society. You know, everybody has to do their part here. It's not just Asians, it's just not Latinos or Latinx, it's not just African Americans, it's all of us. We all are in danger from this thing, and it all has to start with us by being empathic and understanding each other and reaching out to each other, that we can try to stop racism, because COVID doesn't have a nationality, okay? And really the only way we win this is by working together, okay? So remember, report bullying and help us to fight bullying. There is a website for the AAPI Hate Reporting Center where people can log in there and record incidents, which helps us to record the statistics on this stuff. And so it helps law enforcement to be able to channel its resources, and for society to understand what's happening, and for us to take action as a country. So in closing, remember we talked today about my job today, which is to help you to make money. Your job today to talk to people every day. We talked about trends before and after COVID, and we talked about tomorrow's Bloomberg News being reading the future, reading the tea leaves, helping your owners to understand what's happening and the best way to deal with these problems. We talked about winners and losers and why, and the fact that some of these things are not that clear. You know, it's really bad to be in the restaurant business today. You know, my family's in the restaurant business, and you know, we're taking some really big losses in some of those locations. But you know, prosperity is right around the corner, and I think they're going to come back like gangbusters. And we talked about racism and bullying and why that is so dangerous and what's happening out there today. And we all have to be vigilant about that. Okay. So remember, my last advice is wash your hands, don't touch your face, and, you know, just be careful. Okay. If you need anything at all, you're always welcome to give me a call. My phone number is here on the screen. Caesar knows how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer any questions from my CBGR buddies. And at this point, perhaps what we can do is I'm going to stop screen sharing and go to the gallery view and see if there are any of you have any questions. If you're still awake. Caesar?
I have no question. I just have a big thank you to you for a wonderful presentation to, give us some ideas as to how we can talk to property owners, landlords that are having trouble themselves right now. And it's a great approach just to call them, to say hello, to see that you are here, struggling the same as they are, and that the reward comes at the end of the travel, and the road. There's always going to be somebody that you need to help, and somebody's going to help you down the road and give you a property for sale just because you helped them many years ago. I have customers that have called me and 20 years later, and they decide, Cesar, we're just retiring and leaving, and that was great news, just because you help them without just having the what Mike Ferry today says, commission breath.
There's something that I've said in my other presentations for your group, Caesar, is that your job prospecting is to look for change, okay? And by having contact with your clients, you are there at the time when change takes place. And so they turn to you for help with that. So one of your approaches might be, I'm taking a poll, I'm talking to all my shopping center owner clients about what they're doing to deal with the current COVID crisis. And they are helping me to compile a really interesting list of problem solving ideas that I am sharing with everybody. Are you interested in participating? Do you think something like that would be helpful to you, right? And so why don't we start with you? What are you doing right now to struggle with these problems? And then let me tell you some ideas that have been offered to me that help you get over that. And then, talk to them about what they think is going to happen. What are their thoughts about the future of the economy? Are these tenants going to come back? Are they all going to go bad? Are we headed for a recession? And all these kinds of things. But getting them to talk to you helps you to establish that relationship and that trust. And what's happened to me before when I was a broker was that you talk to a client about one thing and they go like, well, actually, we're doing fine there. We're not setting any records. We're doing okay. But we really want to get rid of this single tenant building that I own in, Gardena. Like, okay, great. You might as well, bid that one. So, I want to hear your pitch. So by talking to those people, you're in the right place at the right time.
David, you're talking about inflation. We're already seeing the inflation. When we go to the restaurant, we used to spend $20 per person. Now they are spending at least $40–50. And also the lumber just recently increased 40%. So how does that affect our real estate development, in the future or immediately in 2021?
So Peter's question was that we think we're seeing inflation in a number of different sectors of the economy already, and how does that change what we view as being the future of real estate, and how it affects our relationships with our clients. Okay, inside pro secret. Okay, your job is not to argue with your client. If they think inflation is coming, inflation is coming.
Inflation is coming.
If they think that we're headed for recession, we're headed for
recession.
Okay. Your answer is always the same. Well, if inflation is coming, you should buy yourself another shopping center right now. Okay. And I happen to have one right here. If they think a recession is coming, it's time for you to sell that property because these things are going to drop like a stone. Okay. Whatever they think is right is right. Okay. Your job is to have a solution, and conveniently that involves taking some action, right? But that's a little bit humorous and it's a little bit true, unfortunately. Part of the idea is that they're looking for answers right now, okay? And so you want to take that kernel and talk to them a little bit about those things. It may be that we're headed for a heavy inflationary period. I mean, that I'm buying a house right now. A lot of people are buying houses right now. Housing prices are going up. Rents are coming down though, right? So, so we don't know what the full drink of this thing is. And just because certain commodities are going up doesn't mean that everything is going to increase in price, okay? But if your client believes that we're going to have widespread inflation, well, that's a great time to buy assets, right? You need to get your money out of cash. You need to get your money out of the stock market, pardon me, or bonds, and you need to get into assets that are going to increase with that inflation, right? Anybody else?
Well, actually, it's a comment, David, and personally, I'm agreeing with you what you mentioned. I do thank you for the great seminar and about the racism. It's hard to hear that, but that's the way it goes right now. But we need to put our part. But how do you see the big cities like for San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, about investment economy? Like for instance, you're talking about the rent is going to decrease because I'm sure that you're seeing when you're driving by, you're seeing a lot of places for rent now. So what percentage, what percentage do you believe that this will be lower on the rent?
Oh, I have no idea.
You follow my question.
I mean, that's definitely not a question for me.
Okay.
What I would say, and what I always observe about the San Gabriel Valley is that, you know, one of the problems that we have in this community is that it's a very old community, and the retail and commercial strips were built in a bygone era when people walked up to little storefronts and frequented small merchants, right?
Okay.
You know, Joe's Shoe Repair, you know, Betty's shoe store, you know, Sally's hair salon, you know, and you know what we did is we've gone through a lot of things. We've gone through regional malls, we've gone through big box stores. You know, our economy has gone through a lot of different forms of evolution over time. But in the San Gabriel Valley, it's been left behind. You know, you look at, you know, my office used to be on San Gabriel Boulevard. San Gabriel Boulevard is junk. You know, and that's the namesake street in the city of San Gabriel. We used to have redevelopment agencies that could purchase properties and try to improve those things. You know, those were disappeared with the financial crisis of 2008. All that money was sort of commandeered by the state to use for other things. And so the RDAs, the redevelopment agencies, were disbanded. Well, as a result of that, we don't have urban renewal anymore. We don't have you know, a government agency to try to turn over space. And, you know, you look at space on, you know, to some degree, Las Tunas Drive, Main Street, San Gabriel Boulevard, Temple City Boulevard, Rosemead Boulevard. I mean, it's weird stuff. You know, one of my clients is one of the large retailers on Main Street. I mean, he's in a building, it must be a 9,000 square foot building on 3 stories. Okay. I mean, and there's no parking. Right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, you know, what happens to that space? How does it get repurposed? You know, when people are buying stuff online, you know, these are strange issues, but there is no solution for them, at least now in the San Gabriel Valley. And so, you know, quite frankly, if you own a storefront on Huntington Drive, even, okay, I mean, you know, down the street from me, I'm at the last building before you leave the city of Arcadia, in the Wells Fargo Bank building on Huntington. And, you know, up the street from me is like a former bicycle shop, stuff like that, over by the Outback Steakhouse, and, you know, across from Matt Denny's. I know, Cesar, you never go to places like Matt Denny's because you don't drink at all, but for those who socialize occasionally, you know, you're familiar with that place. You know, I don't know what happens to those guys. It's not easy to repurpose that space. Okay, you know, how many tutoring centers can we have, right? But if you're a retailer, you know, it's a challenging time. Okay, and one thing that you see in this community is because so many people here have, you know, very entrepreneurial instincts, right? You know, and so they want to start these small businesses, but small businesses have a very high failure rate. And so, you know, just drive around, and, you know, I've lived in this community for almost 20 years now, and, you know, you pass these places every day on the way to work or something like that, and how many times have you seen them turn over? How many, you know, what percentage of the time since 2005 has that space been vacant? 50%? 60%. You know, there's other times when you drive by and it's like, it looks like there's a business in there, but it kind of looks like it's out of 1970. And you think, is anybody actually, I've never seen anybody actually walk in there. You know, it's got this stale, you know, window display with, you know, pictures of women with like 1981 fashions. You know, think, what, is that a front for the mob? Do people actually live in the back? You know, because there's no real business going on there that appears viable to me, you know? So these are weird questions that face us, but it tells you a lot about that product type in this market. And I've been a skeptic for a long time. You know, I had an office building on San Gabriel Boulevard, and although my ex was a realtor, she never tried to lease it. I only took half of the building. The rest of the half, the other half of the building was vacant the whole time. You know,
Wow.
we didn't try to rent it. We didn't have to, but it was vacant space. You know, so you know, there's a lot of kind of underutilization of real estate here because the configurations are wrong for modern applications. And so until we've figured out that problem, you know, frankly, in my view, they're investments to avoid. Okay. And, you know, they work for some people who have their own businesses that are longstanding, and they want to run their own shop, and they're mobile, they can move that business. Then they're the ones who should buy those storefronts, you know,
Okay.
CPAs, you know, lawyers, other people, service providers who need a place to hang their hat, because some of them don't need that, you know. But, you know, how many, you know, all those boba places, remember when boba was a rage?
Yep.
And then we had foot massage places, you know, in every other door. They come and they go, they come and they go. And, you know, that's a real problem for the landlord, right? Because that space is dark, you know, at least half the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. By the way, I still carry your pen, okay?
It's not out of ink yet. That's I thought they only sold them to me with like this much ink in there, you know. Well, thanks very much,
Hey, David.
everybody, and I hope I didn't bore you
Hey.
too much.
David,
Thank
just
you,
have a
sir.
comment
David,
on what you said a couple minutes ago regarding the downtown Arcadia Huntington Drive. You are going to see a huge change over there, believe me.
You talking about the Trammell Crow project?
No.
Are you,
That one probably gone.
are you,
Probably.
you're talking
And-
about,
and-
well, there's the new hotel coming in, but are you aware of the Trammell Crow project?
No.
The Trammell Crow, if you're not all familiar with it, is, you know, is a huge mega builder out of Texas, and they are proposing to do a multifamily site, which would be mostly like Gen X, young people, you know, small units, singles, bachelors, 1-bedroom units, at the corner of basically Wheeler and Santa Anita, across from the Rusnak site, from the Rusnak Mercedes site. And
Yep.
there's a high-rise, the only high-rise building in Arcadia right now is on that site. And they're going to link them together. So it's a joint venture with Positive Investments that owns that high-rise building and Trammell Crow to build a residential component attached to there. And then they're hoping that they can wake up the retail component on Huntington Drive and create a walking district that will be sort of part of that. It's also immediately adjacent to the Metro Line Gold Rail site, so that they're hoping that people will, you know, live, work, and you know, use that transportation nexus to get to other places, and then have places to go for dinner in the evening and do some light shopping and things like that. That's a very long view, okay, and I hope it happens. But you know, it's going to take a lot of doing to get it to happen. Okay.
There could be some changes.
Change is the name of the game, Steve. You know that. Change goes with everything in the 21st century. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from anybody?
We're-
Thank you so much, Caesar.
Thank
I'm looking
you.
forward to have a drink with you soon.
Thank you.
soon,
Looking
soon.
forward.
Okay. And
Thank you,
great to
David,
see
so much.
everybody. Young, my broker, David Yoon, my client, Tomas, my buddy, Peter, my old buddy. It's good to see all of you. James, nice to meet you. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Remember, don't forget it, the third Wednesday of every month, we have the commercial marketing, commercial meeting, and we will have a great speaker next meeting. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
Good seeing